New England, the home to great competition, great schools, and great stories. Episode 1 of a new era in the CNE starts right now. Welcome, everybody, to the Leading as One podcast, the official podcast of the Conference of New England. I'm your host, Assistant Commissioner Brett Bosley, and in this podcast, we'll dive into the stories, insights, and experiences that shape our conference, our student athletes, our communities, and institutions. Each of these episodes will sit down with coaches, administrators, and student athletes to explore leadership, sportsmanship, and the impact of athletics beyond the game. Whether it's championship moments, personal growth, or the power of teamwork, this podcast is all about what it means to lead together, united as one. So let's get started. This is the Leading as One podcast. So first, I'll start off, once again, introduce myself. I'm Brett Bosley, Assistant Commissioner for Communications in the Conference of New England, and just wanted to give a little dive into why we decided we wanted to start a podcast. First and foremost, I think to create a platform to feature our student athletes at the conference level. Really important, I think, to recognize that without the great student athletes at each of our schools, the administrators, coaches, we're nothing without everybody on our campuses. So from conference staff, from Patrick Colbert, Julie Beer, and myself, we thank you all for all that you do throughout the year. We really appreciate it. Secondly, to highlight the accomplishments, not just of our student athletes, but once again, the coaches, administrators, and alumni, really all in one medium to collectively give our membership recognition we think that you guys deserve. Especially with our 40th anniversary celebration this year, really thought it was important to start telling the stories of our current student athletes, our alumni, our coaches, administrators, and hopefully we'll be able to do some of that. Really wanted to just do something new, after the rebrand and changing names from formerly the Commonwealth Coast Conference now to the Conference of New England, and the whole rebrand that we did at the beginning of August. We thought it would be a great idea to try something different. One of those ways to recognize everybody was to do a podcast. And so to really talk about the league in some sort of fashion, in some medium, and this is where we landed. So hopefully everybody will enjoy it. Again, we wanted to tie it into our 40th anniversary celebration, and we'll cover that with Commissioner Patrick Colbert later in the episode when we have our commissioners chat. With that, let's hop into some current news. Just released this past week, the Conference of New England announced they will be adding 2 new programs to our women's tennis roster. So we'll say welcome to the University of St. Joseph and Colby Sawyer College, both in on the men's side, now coming in on the women's side for women's tennis. That'll start in the fall of 2025. So welcoming in the Chargers and the Blue Jays. We're really happy to have you. Next, I alluded to our 40th anniversary celebration. Just wanted to throw out that that'll be coming out every Thursday throughout the rest of the year. I think minus a week or two. You can check the calendar. But we created a landing page, a home page for our 40th anniversary celebration. That is at cnesports.org/40th 40th. And there will be all of the press releases listed out when they come out with the dates. And then in addition, we'll have a hyperlink to interactive roster of each of those 40th anniversary teams. So really excited for that as well. And then lastly, wanted to just congratulate all of our fall champions with this podcast. The first episode being here in February. We missed out on the fall. And so wanted to take the time and opportunity to congratulate all of our fall champions. So with that said, from men's cross country, congratulations to Roger Williams University with individual champion Nathan Tassi, also of Roger Williams. Congratulations to you guys. Women's cross country, Suffolk University taking the team championship with Rachel Brennan of Gordon College taking the individual championship. On the football side, Endicott College taking the championship in that sport. Men's soccer, Suffolk University grabbing the championship. And in women's soccer with their first championship under the CNE, the University of Hartford. In field hockey, Roger Williams University. In women's tennis, Nichols College. In men's golf, Roger Williams University and individual champion Ryan Dacey, also of Roger Williams. And lastly, in volleyball, Endicott College taking the victory there. Now for our current sports, looking ahead just about 1 month ago, actually less than 1 month ago, really coming down to it. Let's start with women's hockey. Looking at the current standings, Endicott College, currently nationally ranked, leading the way. 10-2 overall record in conference play, sitting at 31 points, followed by the University of New England, 7-5-1 overall in conference play for 22 points. Johnson & Wales, Suffolk University, Western New England, Curry, all right there as well, vying for playoff spots. So going to be a great race in women's hockey coming down to it. Looking at the statistics side, leading the league in goals, Rivers Morris from Endicott College. She currently sits at 10 goals. Mabel Gerard and Tegan Hall. Mabel from Western New England University, Tegan from Endicott College, both with 9 goals apiece. On the men's side of the ice, Curry College currently sitting on the top of the standings with 34 points, 11-2 and 0 overall in conference play. University of New England right behind them, 31 points, 10-3 and 0 overall record in conference play. Also then followed in third by Endicott College, 28 points. Those three all nationally ranked, followed by in fourth, fifth, and sixth, Johnson & Wales, 15 points, Wentworth, 14, Nichols College, and Suffolk tied at 13. 4 teams fighting for 3 spots just about in the standings for men's ice hockey, so going to be a great, exciting finish there. Looking at the stats, leading the league right now in goals, Ryan Kuzmich of the University of New England, 16 goals on the season. Elias Lakeson from Curry College and Dominic Murphy from the University of New England, each with 13 goals, followed by Andrew Karapov from Endicott, Primo Self from Endicott, and Dominic Garazzo of Endicott. All 3 of those goals, 11 goals apiece. Flipping over to hoops, starting with women's basketball, Western New England University sitting right at the top in conference play, 11-1, followed closely by both Endicott and Roger Williams, each with 10-2 conference records. University of New England sitting right there at 7-5 overall, before a trio of schools sitting at 5-7. That's Nichols, Suffolk, and Hartford, all vying for playoff spots, with Gordon College also sitting in the weeds at 4-8, looking to make a move during this last month. Looking at some early point getters in women's basketball, currently leading in scoring, Abriana Vasquez of Nichols College, 21.5 points per game, followed by Emmy Rivera, who's having a nice season for Gordon College, currently sitting at 16.2 points. Switching over to the men's side of the hardwood, Western New England and Endicott College both tied at the top of the conference with 10-2 overall records in the CNE, followed by Suffolk University at 9-3, Roger Williams at 8-4, and Nichols College 7-5. Those 5 teams really fighting it out, especially the top 3. Western New England has won 2 in a row. Endicott currently on a heater, 6 in a row, followed by Suffolk, who's won 4 in a row. All 3 of those teams hot, looking to make a move once we get into the tournament. And then on the men's side, right now leading the way in scoring, Javian Flowers Smith of Nichols College, 21.9 points per game, just edging out Marcus Montagnino from Endicott College, 21.5 points per game. And notably, Keenan Robertson of Suffolk University, 21 points rather than to die. All 3 of those guys having really great years so far. And with that, we'll move on to our first interview of the podcast, starting out with Western New England field hockey senior Zoe Wexler. Happy to have done this interview with her. She was great and had a lot to say. Obviously, many of you might know her as the conference's national liaison for SAC. She's represented the league at the national level for the last few years, and especially this year, did a great job at convention in January. So without further ado, let's hear from Zoe. All right, we're now joined here by Zoe Wexler, senior from Western New England University, field hockey goalkeeper. Zoe, first of all, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is very exciting.
Yeah, well, first off, wanted to just explain the segment real quick. So every episode, we're going to feature a student athlete on our podcast and, go through what makes, your career or what's made your career so far. And so charting your course is the name of this segment. So in lieu of that, let's talk about your course, Zoe. So you're a senior at Western New England, but let's back up a little bit and kind of go through, how you got there. What was the journey like when you were first figuring out that A, you wanted to go to Western New England, and B, kind of navigating whether or not you're going to be a student athlete?
Yeah. So I never thought I'd play sports in college, actually. I grew up dancing for about 14 years of my life. And then as I entered middle school, we were forced to pick a sport to play. And I was like, oh, I want to pick one of those obscure sports. Like, I don't want to do soccer. I don't want to do anything. So I picked field hockey. I've never picked up a stick in my life. And I thought I really sucked at field hockey, quite honestly. And then they were like, oh, we need a goalkeeper. And I was like, I'll do that. That can't be that complicated of a task. I kind of was my dance background, I think, just made me a natural in the world of field hockey, but I felt I started really late. So I just didn't think I was going to go play in college, quite honestly. I thought it was going to end after high school. I ended up moving from Maryland to Connecticut, and the high school that I moved to in Connecticut didn't have a field hockey team in high school. So I then absolutely didn't think I was playing in college because I didn't even have a high school team. I was just playing club. I was just kind of doing this for fun. So I was really, really going to school for academics. I knew that was the outcome of college for me, was getting a job, academics. What am I going to do with my life after that? How am I going to get a paycheck? All that kind of fun stuff. But I would do random field hockey stuff on the side. I had a bunch of schools that I had, was looking at. I looked at Elms, I looked at St. John Fisher, I looked at the University of New Haven, I looked at Western Connecticut. And funny enough, I was at a field hockey clinic for fun. And when I left that clinic, I got an email from our grad assistant at the time. And she was like, I really think you should consider Western New England. And I was like, I don't even know where Western New England is. I've never heard of Western New England at all. And by this time, I had really started to get into chemistry, and I knew I wanted to go into forensic chemistry. So I looked up Western New England. I saw they had the major that I wanted, and I was like, you know what? Why not? If they want to give me a shot playing field hockey in college, and there's a major there that suits me, I'll go look at the school. I'll go see if I like it. And the moment I walked on campus, I was like, yep, I'm going to WNE. This is my home. This is my place. So, but very, very long. There's a lot of like, is this happening? It's probably not happening. Oh, well, if this doesn't happen. So a lot of things just happen, on the fly, which I'm all about. I think you should wing it most of the time, quite honestly.
Well, talking about winging it, I think for a lot of student athletes, the transition is one of the big pieces of your college experience coming in as a freshman. Talk about your transition. Now once you decided that you were going to Western New England, that you were going to play field hockey, what was that transition like for you? Obviously moving away from home and being on college campus and having some structure to your life in some capacity. Just talk about how that experience was for you.
It was really difficult. I remember because I've never really played organized sports in the sense like we do in college. So not having a high school team and just being left to my own devices. The fact is that during the summer, I'm getting these workout packets and I'm being told like, what we need to do and how we need to prepare. And I was like, this is crazy. I've never worked out to this caliber. I've never prepared to this caliber. So as a fall athlete, we're coming in about 2 weeks early before the rest of campus. And all we're doing is living and breathing field hockey. So there is no academics associated with that. And you come in and you're basically put through a gauntlet of just really getting ready for the season as a team. And I was so not ready. I was kind of shell shocked a little bit as to the caliber of, that I needed to get to, that I felt I wasn't at. And and then on the flip side of that, it's really hard to make friends and to adjust to college when you've come onto campus 2 weeks before everyone else. You've been put into this pod of the same girls over and over again. You're with each other every single day, for basically 8 to 9 hours a day. And all you're doing is playing field hockey. So then the moment it was time to start school and the moment it was time to do stuff that other athletes or other students within the student body could interact with each other, we were playing field hockey. And I don't regret that at all. I love playing field hockey. But then when actual school started, a lot of us felt lost. A lot of us felt that we didn't have our friends. We had each other, but we didn't have a larger group of friends. So acclimating to college was definitely a hard transition because basically you just come in and you're an athlete and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, yeah, now go do school. And you're in college too. So it's like your professors are giving you homework every day. You're spending about 3 to 4 hours outside of the classroom preparing for, quizzes and exams and homework. And then on top of that, knowing that, every night for 2 hours, you got to make time to go to the field because you guys have practice. So I always think that if your time management skills aren't good, the moment you become a student athlete, they get really good.
Let's talk about your freshman year a little bit. You were thrust into the lineup. You played 11 games. What do you remember about your freshman year on the field? What about that first year, helped you in your experience over these last three?
My freshman year, again, I didn't think I was going to play at all because, again, I didn't have really a background. I wasn't like a trained field hockey goalie. Again, I just kind of was winging it. And so I just went to practice and was like, I'm just going to get better. And my coach just kept telling me, I need you to get to that next level. I need you to get to try these skills and really break out of your shell. And I just remember thinking when it was finally my turn to start my first game, there was this long week that I just remember really breaking out of my shell. I was doing things I never thought I would do. I was diving for balls. I was, smothering on players. I was taking out some of my friends at practice. They're flying over my heads while I'm saving all these balls. And I just remember really just breaking out of my shell as a goalkeeper and just being more confident. So then my coach was like, cool. So you're going to start the next game. Well, the next game happened to be our first conference game. So yay, and your coach is telling you how stressful or how important, not stressful, but how important conference is. And she was like, you're going to start. You're just fine. You're prepared to do this. My teammates were telling me I was prepared, but I remember being so scared. I was like, what if I mess up? What if she never lets me play a single game ever again? Um, and we get to Roger Williams, and I'm freaking out. I'm trying to have a good warm up. I'm trying to get focused. And I ended up having my first ever shutout. It was a 6-0 win. I remember some pretty big saves were made. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then I was ready to just go back to the bench. I thought this was just like a one shot kind of, like she was like, you had your chance. That's it. You're going to be done. And I was like, great. I'm fine to go sit on the bench again. And then I was like, oh, I'm playing the next game. Oh, I'm playing the game after that. And then I just kept playing. And I was like, oh, I guess this is like a thing now. I guess I'm continuing. I also, not gonna lie, thought the season was like over by the time the Roger game happened. It was only like the fifth game into the season, but I was pretty sure there was only like 3 games after that. So I was kind of like, this season's really long. And keep happening to continue to play. Um, but I really think as a freshman, it's like being thrust in that position is kind of stressful, but in the same time, it gave me a lot of confidence to know that if that was where I was at when I started college, there was immense growth for me to get to as I continued to get older.
So talk about your growth a little bit. The next year as a sophomore, I believe that is where you first got involved with SAC.
Yes,
Was you were named
yes.
an associate member with SAC during your sophomore year. So talk about that journey. You come in and it's been, you learn your balancing act between academics and sports during your freshman year, and then sophomore year you add to your plate a little bit. And and obviously I think I forgot to mention you're our main SAC representative at the Conference of New England, and you're working at the national level. So your journey with SAC as well, I think, started quite a bit ago, and so kind of how that evolved for you.
So my journey with SAC started actually my freshman year. I was voluntold to join SAC because the field hockey team needed SAC representatives, and my coach just felt like I was a good pick. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll go to the SAC meetings. I'm a very big person in this world. I think that when you're in a new environment, it's very important for you just to like sit and observe and listen. I always think listen first, ask questions later, observe the situation you're in, kind of get the environment that you're in. So my freshman year, I don't think I said a word in SAC. I think I just sat there and observed what was happening in Western New England SAC. My sophomore year, I still a part of SAC. I'm now, officially the starting goalkeeper on the field hockey team. So everything that's happening in the field hockey team is still going strong. I played all my games that season. And then academically, I still going strong. Luckily for me, I came in with a lot of credits. So I kind of was ahead of the schedule for academics. So my sophomore year was a little bit of a light year for me. I didn't have to necessarily pile on a bunch of classes in order to graduate. I was not planning on graduating early, so I could add a couple minors, add a couple fun classes. I didn't have to really stress myself out. But sophomore year, everyone kind of knew who I was. I started speaking up a little more. So in the fall, I started expressing my concerns, expressing, you know, my wants, our desires. Um, I know there was one incident that happened at our school um, where unfortunately just some not kind words were said about other people. And I went to Coach Collins and I was like, that's just not the environment of Western New England. And I think we really need to tackle this. So between speaking in the SAC meetings and kind of like behind the scenes stuff, basically about me just advocating for what I think is right, the time came that Western New England needed to put up a associate member representative for the national SAC, which is obviously the SAC that represents all the conferences across um, the nation. And Coach Collins walked up to me, our AD, and she was like, I'm going to nominate you. And I said, cool. And I didn't really know what that involved or what that meant, but I was like, that sounds wonderful. But we didn't really think I was going to get it because 2 years prior to me, WNE had an associate member on SAC. So we felt like it was probably going to go to a different school. So I remember, don't, if anyone's listening to this, don't do this, but I remember getting the application in my physics class, zoning out in physics class. Don't do that. Pay attention in your physics class. Filling out that application relatively quickly. And then I sent it in. And a week later, our commissioner was like, great, you're the associate member. And I was like, oh, cool. I don't really know what that means, but that's great. And then not a month later, I was being told that you're going to Indianapolis. You got a meeting you got to go to. And I was like, oh, I signed up for something pretty big here. The journey that I've gone on with National SAC is even greater. I think that I started college really shy. I started college not, just again, it was hard to make friends. It was hard to adapt to a new environment. And I just remember I'm just not a big person who always jumps out of her shell immediately, especially in new environments. But being a national SAC forces you to advocate for others and step out of your comfort zone like quite a bit. So my first national SAC meeting, I didn't say a word. I you're afraid to raise your hand, and then you raise your hand, you're like, oh my God, this is gonna sound so stupid. I shouldn't speak right now. But by my next meeting and the next meeting after that, the people you work with in the NCAA really just push you to step outside your comfort zone and ask questions and raise your hand and speak up. So I've gone from someone who truly sometimes would never speak in a big crowd to someone who encourages others to speak in a big crowd and knows that there's a great reward to be reaped when you finally step outside of your comfort zone. So thank you, National SAC, for making me a stronger leader. And even in National SAC, I've gone from the associate member, I'm now the primary member. So my junior year, I reapplied to be the primary member on National SAC, which meant that I basically was just the main person who was going to 4 meetings a year. Basically, the SAC structure is we had partner conferences. So your primary member would talk with your associate member, and the primary member would go to 4 meetings a year, and your associate would go to 2 meetings a year. And your primary member basically would just gather all the information from the associate and make sure their voices were heard. So finally, every 3 years that switches. So finally, it was the CNE's turn to be the primary, and I reapplied and went through the whole nominating process, and the NCAA picked me to be the primary member. So I've been an associate member, I'm now a primary member, and I am now the director of communications for D3 National SAC. From going from, I think I was like sophomore year, I was a 19-year-old, being 19 and never speaking in an entire, room like that and feeling really intimidated, to being 22 and the director of communications is pretty big leap, but it's been a pretty fun journey.
And along the journey, I mean, as you said, you really started from the bottom, and you worked your way up the rung, especially on the national level. But along that way, for you, what has been the most fulfilling piece to that journey, for you personally?
I think it's like twofold. So I think one thing that has been really rewarding is seeing the growth of the students within my school and some of our conference institutions understanding the importance that their voices are heard. I would have never known that the NCAA cares about what we have to say until I joined National SAC. And I know that my friends definitely didn't think the NCAA cared at all, nor even the conference cared at all. I think that there's a misconception that the higher up you get, just the less they kind of talk to student athletes. But realistically, the NCAA, the conference, your guys' job depends on us. Like your guys' job is
Mhm.
us, quite honestly, and
That's
our
right.
successes and our what we're wanting to do. And I remember I think it was like a couple months into me being the associate member, and I was telling my SAC things, and they all were really shocked that, the NCAA was asking us these questions and that this was feedback the NCAA wanted to hear. And I think having me in the room really showed them that their voice is going somewhere, that I am speaking to the people who, are all the way up there. Charlie Baker and I talk once, 4 times a year probably, and he cares. And so being able to see the growth in people realizing that their voices are heard, I think is really rewarding. Because that's kind of a tangible thing that I can see. But I think the other thing that's really rewarding, and it didn't actually hit me until my SAC meeting yesterday, but I had girls and guys coming up to me and just telling me that they looked up to me. And I feel like I go about my day. I don't think I'm anything special. I just think I'm doing a job that's been given to me. So, to be on national SAC, to be a captain of the field hockey team, I don't think that's anything special. But, when you're going about your day-to-day life and you have people telling you that like they do look up to you and that the stuff you're doing is noticed, just, it makes it really rewarding to know that I'm affecting people's lives, whether or not they want to tell me or not, or whether or not, I'm noticing or not. But knowing that other people are being uplifted, other people are feeling empowered, um, and know that, if they needed anything, I'm right there for them. That's really rewarding to know that other people are truly being impacted by the work I'm doing, and I'm not just doing it fruitlessly.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of finish up. I mean, obviously, your body of work with SAC has been great. This year, you were the Scholar Athlete of the Year for field hockey, which is a great honor for you.
Shock
I
of
I
my life
assume.
when that happened.
Yeah.
We were all like, a bunch of my friends were all together, and we knew the awards were coming out, and um someone like walked up to me and they were like, "Oh my God, congratulations." And I was like, "On what?" And they were like, "You're the Scholar Athlete of the Year." And I think my jaw like hit the floor. I was like, "What?" So it was a big shock, but it was a like you said, a welcome shock.
Yeah, actually, well, we'll talk about that. I mean, those that award itself, I mean, is voted on by the coaches. So for you, what does that speak to you as to how other coaches around the league see you?
That's really kind. I didn't know that was voted on by
Yeah.
the coaches. Um, I remember getting when I got the award, I called my dad. Me and my dad are very close. And I said, "Oh my God, guess what? I'm the Scholar Athlete of the Year." And the first thing he told to me, which really stuck with me, was that I love all the awards my teammates get. And I love all the sports awards. Last year I rallied to get goalkeeper of the year for all of our sports at the CNE
Mhm.
meeting in the convention last year.
That's
So I
right.
love all of those awards. But there's something about getting an award in a sport that has nothing to do with sports and athletics that my dad was like, bottom line, you're a great athlete, but you're more than that. You're beyond that. And so, the work that I've done in the classroom, like countless hours, I was up until midnight last night doing my math homework. The countless hours I put in to make sure that, I'm getting good grades and that I'm excelling in something beyond just athletics is really important to me. And so the fact that the coaches across the league, my coach recognizes that is hard work I am putting in. That's really nice. I didn't know that they all voted that. But it means a lot to me to know that I am not just a field hockey goalie. And I think that that's the great thing about being a Division 3 athlete is we're not defined by our sport. I am student ambassador. I give tours. I train all of our tour guides. I'm part of the school musical. So every spring I'm singing and dancing on a stage. I play field hockey. I'm, president of the Forensic Science Honor Society here. I'm the national SAC representative. I'm part of an engineering club here on campus. So me as a whole is very much beyond whatever stats or, however the season went, however many goals I let in, however many goals I saved. Getting an award like that really shows that I'm far greater of a person than just a goalkeeper on a field hockey team.
All right, so I'll wrap it up with this question. Because you are such a prominent figure, at least in the CNE now, at the student athlete level, for those who don't get to sit with you in a room for SAC, whether that be at Western New England or other institutions, kind of at the conference level, if you had a message for your peers across the conference, what would that message be?
Two messages. One message is get involved and know what's happening in your schools at the very least. I obviously know what's happening at a much greater level. But again, that's a job that was given to me. So understanding what's happening nationally is my job. But definitely know what's happening in your schools and figure out what you can do to make your schools better because your schools might be great, but I'm sure that they can get better. So getting involved, speaking up, inserting yourselves in places you might not feel you should insert yourself into, but I always I always say if you're saying it with the correct intentions, then you're just fine. If you're speaking up with good in your heart, then you're doing nothing wrong. So speak up and really just put yourself out there. And then the other thing I would say is kind of find your purpose in life. And that's really daunting to think about at the age of 18 to 22. But your purpose could even be something as simple as, there was a portion of my field hockey career that I didn't play for an entire season. But my purpose was, if you ask my team, I'm like their mom. My purpose is to help make sure that they're going to classes, that they know what resources are available to them, and that they're still, if they have any questions, they know they can call me. Um, and I think that again, as a Division III athlete, our lives in sports is going to end at some point. Um, we're all not going to play professionally. We're not all going off to, be these superstars. You might coach a club here on the side and don't ever lose your passion for sports, but definitely find a place where you thrive and where you can, life after graduation will come and find those hobbies that make that transition a lot easier. I have so many hobbies that I'm not really scared for that transition, but I know a couple of my friends who field hockey is all they've ever known, and it's been really difficult for them to, you know, make that transition into not playing field hockey as much anymore. So find your hobbies, find your purpose, find your passion, and they can change. Your passion, your purpose can change. I'm sure my passion will change when I'm 23. So in a year, I'm sure my purpose will change in a year. But if you have like just a guiding, like a compass guiding you in that direction, I think it'll make all the transitions that much easier.
Awesome. Well said. Well, thank you so much, Zoe, for joining us. Zoe Wexler, senior goalkeeper from West New England. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for having me.
And once again, we want to thank Zoe so much for sitting down with us and doing that interview. Really appreciative of her taking the time to talk with us and give her some insights as to her journey so far at Western New England, and will hopefully be coming next for her in what has been a great college career. Now, lastly, we will shift gears and go to our last interview of our podcast, and it'll come as our commissioner's chat as we sit down with Commissioner Patrick Colbert and get an insight into what's going on in the Conference of New England. All right, we're now joined by Commissioner of the Conference of New England, Patrick Colbert, for our new Commissioner's Chat portion of our podcast. Patrick, glad to be here with you.
Thanks, Brett. Happy to be here on the inaugural podcast. We're really excited and really appreciate all the work that you've put into starting this. I think it's going to be a really neat way for us to share the ongoings of our conference, tell the stories of our student athletes and administrators on our campuses. And we all know how popular podcasts are these days, so why not add another one to the mix?
That's right. And so we'll start with you on the rebrand. I think, you've talked about it publicly and we've done some things from the league standpoint, but we've never really talked about it on an open platform yet. So, for those who don't know, take us just behind the genesis of the rebrand, kind of where it started and, how things ended up.
Yeah, happy to. And I think it's important, and we've said along through this entire process that whatever we end up with, whatever the end result is with new logo, new name, it's important to explain the context behind it, because I think that's going to really add a storytelling element that is unique to any rebrand. And honestly, when coming on to what was the Commonwealth Coast Conference, one of the first conversations I had with university leadership was, what do we think about the name? And from kind of a couple different perspectives. One being, does the Commonwealth Coast Conference speak to the geography and makeup of our current membership? Whereas the Commonwealth really speaks to one state in New England, Massachusetts, and we're spread a little bit more out than we have been in the past, which is a good thing. And secondly, with any sort of transition in leadership, we have some new presidents on our campuses. We have some new athletic directors on our campuses. It was a good time to at least assess the feasibility of looking at a rebrand and a name change. And at the end of the day, maybe the answer is we've got too much brand equity built up in the Commonwealth Coast Conference, and we should at least pivot and allow ourselves the ability to be broader based with a name or not, or just a logo change. So there were a lot of different conversations that we went through to see what really we want the vision of this project to look like in the end. And it started there very simply. Our presidents, led the charge in terms of wanting to move in a direction of a name change. I think there were certainly some institutions within our membership that felt the name did not represent us appropriately. And from there, it became a really collaborative effort with our membership, various constituents within our membership. I think one of the most challenging parts of any rebrand is ensuring ample feedback, um, effective feedback, uh, analyzing that feedback, and kind of applying that feedback without compromising the direction of where you're trying to go. And I think all in all, we all did a really nice job of keeping that at a high level, keeping our communication effective, and meeting the goals of what we wanted to accomplish. And, the first step really was the name. And we looked at it hard. We looked, um, at a lot of different options. We looked at Division One, Two, and Three conference names, and the reasoning behind that was how can we be a little bit unique? What made sense in terms of the actual words that were going to be in our conference name? Ultimately, we felt like the most advantageous thing that all of us in New England really have is the region of New England, especially in Division Three. We're very thickly settled in terms of the amount of institutions in Division Three that are in our region. Our coaches are out there recruiting to New England. Our admissions offices are recruiting to New England and selling the brand of New England. We have a lot of great professional sports. We have a lot of attractive locations where our institutions are set up in some of those locations. So we felt like our name should kind of equate to some of that thinking. And ultimately, we landed on the Conference of New England and really feel like that puts us in a position where our name is unique compared to our peers in the conference, which was important to us. And also, it's simplified and really speaks to how we feel the diversification of our membership within the New England region. We're in all states but one, and I think that is something that not all of our peer conferences can speak to at this point, and ultimately felt like we could build a good logo and good visual aesthetic part of the project out of the name, and we landed on step two was the makeup of the logo and really the symbology behind the project.
Yeah, great segue. Now to talk about the logo. Going through the process, you just touched on it. Speaking to all of New England. So when you look at the logo, you see still kind of an ode to the old name with the Lighthouse being a coastal conference with some locations such as Endicott, Gordon, sort of on the North Shore and in Massachusetts, but also incorporating now some mountains, which speaks more to the inland uh, institutions of the conference. But when going through the logo process, what were some of those conversations like, and how did you end up with what we see today?
Yeah, I'll admit that was probably one of the more challenging aspects of the project because we wanted our mark to be all inclusive of our institutions. There's only so many things that you can include in a small mark without compromising, the aesthetic of the mark. So we did have a lot of conversation, and I'll be remiss if I didn't mention we did have the great help of Sky Dillon and Sky Design Studios as consulting to create myriad of options of what different things could look like, whether it includes geographical landmarks, actual landmarks within New England, or keeping it generic, which was really an option we were looking at to kind of ensure that we weren't excluding any sort of demographics within our conference. However, at the end of the day, if we are going to speak to New England and be the conference of New England, there has to be something in the mark that's not generic, that is specific to our region. And while, yes, it does provide at least the idea that it's coastal, the lighthouse to me, and I think the selling point behind the lighthouse being the central, the focal point of the mark is um, certainly it speaks to New England, but it also metaphorically for me speaks to what we're really trying to be, and that's leaders in our region, in our industry, in our space, and being collaborators, being proactive. Certainly, it's a little bit cliche, but when you're in the lighthouse, you're seeing what's coming. And our world of college athletics continues to be one that is evolving on a daily basis. And we as a membership, I think, have done a really nice job, and kudos to our leadership to making sure that we're on the forefront of thinking with some of the legislative changes, the political changes that are on the horizon. And so we wanted our mark to speak to that line of thinking. And then obviously the mountains, we're in some areas of New England where that's just, was a natural feel. So ultimately felt like we got a good mark out of it while not compromising the integrity of the aesthetic of the logo, not excluding any demographics that are important to our membership, and also kind of metaphorically speaks to some things that we're trying to do as leaders in our region.
And lastly, kind of the third piece to all of the rebrand are the tagline and the hashtag that came out of the rebrand as well. And um, out of those conversations became the tagline "One New England," and then the hashtag being "Lead as One." And so, with one being kind of the primary driver of both of those, how did that come about, and what does that piece stand for?
Yeah, I think to me, it speaks to two things. Obviously, internally, and when I say internally as a conference, we want to be collaborative with each other. We want to be united in what we do in terms of decision making and how we execute policy and how we administer our championships and in terms of how we, treat each other and how our student athletes view us as an organization, quite honestly. We don't need to be 10 separate entities, soon to be 11 separate entities operating in isolation. We want to think the same. Certainly, with any type of governing structure, there's a lot of different perspective on things, and I think that's a great thing because we're in different areas. We have different resources available to us. We have different amount of programs that we're sponsoring. We have different staffing structures, but at the end of the day, it was important for us in the tagline to represent that when we get to a point, we want to make sure that we're all coming back to the same core principles of how we're trying to function, and that's being innovative in our space, being collaborative and being united in all of the things that we're trying to accomplish. And I think that was important to embody in any sort of social tagline that we put out there. And one that, maybe it's a little bit cheesy, but we continue to harp on, with our members and our institutions that we are one and we want to be leaders as one. And the second layer to that, I think, for me, as as a person in my seat and certainly as a conference staff, we want to be working with our peer conferences to find collaborative um, situations where we can help each other. There's no need for us to try to one up each other, whether that's outside of competition, of course. We're always there. We're trying to make sure that the CNE comes out on top. However, we've entered into a scheduling alliance with the NUMAC for football. We've started a postseason bowl opportunity with them. So any way that we can, with the with our peer conferences in the Northeast or New England, help each other from a scheduling perspective, get each other quality non-conference games, set up these types of either neutral site or on-campus environments where there's guaranteed games, guaranteed quote tournament setups. Those are conversations that we're trying to be on the forefront of and working with our conference commissioners on trying to make those things happen, because I think it allows for a unique student athlete experience at the end of the day versus kind of the segmented, here's your non-conference schedule that you see every year, and then you're into conference play. Let's mix it up. Let's get some diversity in the teams that you're playing against. And I think those conversations are happening more frequently. And again, off on a tangent for sure, but it does come back to the tagline and trying to lead in our space and in our region.
Which leads right into our new title of this podcast, the Leading as One podcast. So just some genesis behind how that came about. So some great insight there. Switching gears a little bit, was kind of staying on task. The league also celebrating 40 years, a big anniversary milestone. You know, making that part of the rebrand, being, 40 years or 39 years of the Commonwealth Coast Conference, now the Conference of New England. Talk about, what that means as a league, spending so many years developing and producing some great alumni and student athletes. Just, overall, what this milestone represents and what it means.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a little bit. One of the conversations or concerns, and I would think anyone going through a vast rebrand like we did would have is, are we losing the brand equity we've built up over the course of 39 years? The Commonwealth Coast Conference brand. We've had, some really high level institutions in our conference with, student athletes that have competed exceptionally on the national and regional level consistently in the majority of our sports. Do we lose that when we shift? Certainly the membership is the same and our core values certainly are similar to what they were with the Commonwealth Coast Conference. We're amplifying on those a little bit more, certainly as a new conference, but there is that concern. And with that came this unique opportunity to really celebrate what we were as the Commonwealth Coast Conference and tie it into what we are going to become. I'll admit at first I was a little bit skeptical on the confusion that could create, or really does that mix signals? Is that something we wanted to wait until we, really got through this process and then we accomplish what we're trying to accomplish with an anniversary celebration like this? But at the end of the day, it made a lot of sense to try to tie it in because we could tell a couple different stories and ensure that the messaging of who we are becoming, we've already existed. I think there was also the concern that this new name is a whole other conference. It's not. We are continuing to, thrive with the 10 institutions we currently have that were part of the Commonwealth Coast Conference. So it allowed us to really tell that story. It just seemed to make a lot of sense organically to tie that in and be able to tell two stories at once, and while also making sure that it's clear that we are still recognizing what we were, but let's also remember what really we are working to become at the end of the day.
That's right. And for those interested, 4 teams will have been announced by the time this podcast comes out. So you can check that out. cnesports.org/40th. That'll take you to the homepage of the 40th anniversary celebration. Lists all the press releases, all the team rosters that will be released with each time a roster gets put out. So make sure to go check that out and show your support for all of our past student athletes and alum. One topic that we wanted to touch on here with Patrick, which I think was not a big piece to our fall sports, or at least to the NCAA landscape, but certainly was NPI. So just wanted to ask you. I think some people want to hear from you. We've gone through it with coaches throughout the year, but maybe to the student athlete that might not know too much about it yet, or at least the casual fans of collegiate athletics, just kind of the what came about with that, and how you saw that applied to all of the fall sports that competed so far this year.
Well, I think it's important to note that at any level, it's really hard to select teams to a postseason tournament. No matter what the criteria is, there's always going to be some layer to it that adds some sort of complexity. And I think that the impetus behind NPI was to provide transparency to that process. We saw it with the CFP. We saw it with, we see it annually with March Madness. The level of objectivity with selection committees and looking at resumes and looking at strength of schedule, looking at all these different data points. Um, the eye test was often something that might have made the difference, depending on the committee makeup, depending on what team or institution we're talking about. So Division Three, I'll give credit, took a different approach and said, if we're trying to negate some of that objectivity, let's make it a completely subjective process and lay it all out there. This is something that's existed in men's women's ice hockey in terms of pairwise, which essentially takes
Mhm.
the same metric and applies it to all relevant team sports. So it's not across the board. But in those sports that we do bracket for, there is this component called NPI, which is the NCAA Power Index, which takes essentially all of that data that you are compiling and considering, whether it relates to strength of schedule, winning percentage, opponents winning percentage, and puts it into one number. Um, and what that does for me is, as a conference administrator, I think the beauty of it is it gives us a measurable. It gives us a real time opportunity to use that data. It's existed before, so don't get me wrong there, but now it's in real time, and we're able to use that, educate our coaches, educate our administrators on what this information means. I think the most important takeaway for our membership and coaches is that you can use this information to schedule strategically and intentionally, as it relates to upping your strength of schedule, getting a good win. There's no such thing as a bad win anymore. Um, there is such thing as a good loss. And I think that's important for everybody to have an understanding of. The nice thing about the NPI system is that it does protect you as to its the optimal level to ensure that as soon as your ranking starts to drop because of a certain win that you had against a team that might have been lower ranked, it drops the win. So your NPI is always going to be at an optimal metric, which at the end of the day is important for the committee to have an understanding of, and for institutions and programs to really, there are things at our level that are outside of our control. The amount of resources that we all have to travel out of region versus not traveling out of region is not equitable across the board. So a metric that kind of helps bring us back to some sort of level ground is important. It's new. Change is hard. We're still learning a lot about it. We just went through one season of it, and I think at the end of the day, I would anticipate sport committees to continuously evaluate the metrics behind their rankings. I think that's another important thing to note, that it's not the same sport to sport. Every sport committee really looks at this differently, depending on the sport, depending on the different result types that exist, whether there's overtime, whether there's not overtime. There's a lot of different layers that go into it. And I think it is a positive thing for our division. It's something that we need to accept. It's something that I think we need to use to our advantages as conferences and institutions to really educate ourselves and get ourselves in a position that when coaches are going out and trying to find quality games, they're thinking about it a little bit differently. We're not, as a conference, going to come in and tell you how to schedule, but we are going to give you the resources to schedule effectively so that we're optimizing our postseason bid opportunities, which is a big, um, strategic pillar of ours, is to try to find ways through scheduling, um, to get ourselves into at-large situations. And we're fortunate that we're close. We're fortunate that in some sports we've already had that happen. So I think the ingredients are there. It's just being a little bit more intentional and data driven and analytical with some of this versus kind of just going down the path that has existed and was most comfortable.
Now, if I'm a student athlete, what would be your one message to a student athlete that would really seal the deal on the whole, what this stands for and how it applies to athletics and how a student athlete can view it?
Yeah, that's the challenge. I quite honestly, because I when this system did come into play from both of us being former student athletes, I tried to think about how I would view this and how, more importantly, student athletes can digest this. Because while I think one of the beauties of this is it's transparent, it's in real time, it's regular, you're getting to see where you kind of sit in your region and on the national level. There are going to be instances where programs have X amount of wins, but are lower ranked than, say, others because of, again, these different data points that are baked into the number, strength of schedule being the one. And I think it's important for student athletes to certainly have an understanding of basic understanding of what goes into the MPI. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't change program philosophies of going out and trying to win more than you're losing. I mean, it's quite as simple as that because the wins will get you to where you need to get, in terms of earning conference championships. The thing that we've tried to preach to coaches and student athletes should have an understanding of is try to balance your schedule better than maybe you have in the past, where, and I'm not even saying that this is the case anymore because Division III has evolved so much, but there used to be a situation where coaches would try to go get those quote easy wins. Those don't exist anymore. So try to play a balanced schedule. Play teams, in your region that, are on your level. Play a few that might be lower ranked or previously. Every time we do scheduling, it's with a crystal ball, so you really don't know what's going to come
That's right.
out at the end of the day. But when you get into conference play, everything's outside of your control. The conference schedule is the conference schedule, but I think student athletes should know that we, the conference office, are working collectively as a conference to help each other so that when you get into conference play, we're helping each other and not hurting each other. Because those data points, depending on how we do through the non-conference portion of schedules, could hurt us. And when you're in a situation where you're a 45 NPI team, but then you're playing in the conference schedule and this team is here because of either results that they should have gotten that they didn't get, or their schedule was a little bit, challenged or weaker than it should have been, that's going to impact you. And that to me, and honestly, at the administrative level, at the coach level, I think the one thing that everyone needs to remember is that all of our data points are connected, everything. So, and when I say that, I mean your conference opponents, their opponents' opponents. It's all connected at the end of the day. So, as much as we can, support each other through that and make sure that we have some balance to how we're treating our scheduling. I think student athletes at a high level should have an understanding of that when they, when they talk with their coaches about, not getting in the weeds on how they, get games, but about what maybe goes into it. That's important for them to have an understanding of.
And now to just wrap up here, I wanted to give you an opportunity to give a state of the union, so to speak, of the Conference of New England. So, so maybe some elements wrapping up the rebrand and maybe some takeaways of the rebrand that you might have up to this point, and maybe just an overall review of the fall season from your seat and maybe what you saw.
Yeah, I think from the rebrand, it's been really positive. Our institutions have done an exceptional job in supporting the messaging behind it. I think our office and Brett, you're a big part of this. From an external standpoint, we're trying to push out new initiatives such as this to amplify that brand. And I think I personally, and I think our conference really appreciates aesthetically where we landed in terms of, we have an entirely new website, obviously the new mark and kind of the features behind that. We've really put an intentional effort to um, enhance our branding and signage at our conference championships, which I think is received well. It kind of gives our campuses a little bit of a unique look and feel versus what student athletes feel during the regular season to the postseason, which will always be one of our prime concerns as we go into championship preparations and budgeting. Um, so I think overall it's been positive, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback, and there are other conferences that have reached out to kind of get a better understanding of the things that we employed when going through the rebranding process as they consider going through a similar exercise on their end. So that's always a positive thing to hear, because they wouldn't be asking otherwise if it wasn't.
That's right.
So I think, again, what's important to me in our conference is now the messaging, again, continuing to have these types of avenues to um, really remind people of the why behind this process. And now we need to start practicing what we're preaching. And I think, it's important that, our membership, our student athletes know that the work is really starting now. We're going through a pretty hefty strategic planning process as a conference with our presidents and our athletic directors that, we're excited to kind of make known at a later date on what kind of our priorities looking into the future should be and will be. So that's another positive and exciting aspect of the rebrand exercise. But another successful fall as the CNE for the first time, we again kind of along the lines of the rebrand, our commitment to um, making sure our championships are on the most visible platforms that reach audiences that maybe we haven't been really reaching, at least, certainly on the institutional level, they're doing their thing in terms of making sure their alums have access to streams and all that. But we've signed a partnership with Northeast Sports Network to get all of our championships, semifinal and final rounds, and also our individual sport championships on a broad-based network. They've worked with some of our peers in the region and really did a nice job in the fall of offloading our institutional support needed oftentimes for streaming, which takes away resources from other things going on during championship time. Um, but one, aspect in particular that we really appreciate about this partnership is their ability to be nimble and creative. And one thing we did, I think that's unique a little bit to our division and certainly in our region is we did kind of a wraparound broadcast of the final round of our men's golf championship. So with Brett as the lead, and we had a production on site to capture, the players coming in and finishing on 18, live interviews as the broadcast was going. I think it was something that, again, to get our brand out there even more, to showcase our student athletes, and specifically in golf, in a sport that's often not streamed, which I think was important for us to find a way to get that done. And we were able to do that. So that was a highlight for me, but certainly competitively, we had a lot of unbelievable success individually and collectively as teams. I think a couple things that, stand out in my mind, the University of Hartford winning their first CNE championship, first conference championship in Division III,
Yep.
was really important and exciting to see, in women's soccer. Their women's soccer program uh, is is extremely high level. Look out for them on the national level next year. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some postseason wins from them next year and certainly into future years. So that was really exciting for them to see, especially knowing they're in their last year of transitioning into Division III. So next year they'll be officially eligible for NCAA postseason, which again, I'm excited for, and I'm sure they are extremely excited for going through and finishing their transition process. But Endicott football winning their first ever NCAA football championship win, which is really hard to believe, quite honestly, that it was their first. But again, amazing success for them who have been consistent. Coach McGonigal does an outstanding job with them on an annual basis, and they found themselves up at Cortland against the defending champs for the second year in a row, and took them to the wire. Couldn't have been more
Mm-hmm.
proud of the performance they put on. And I'm going to tell you, I think SUNY Cortland doesn't want to see them anytime soon again, which is really a testament to how competitive their program is and will continue to be. We again some incredible football successes. We've had some All-American student athletes starting, with in football with Monty Quinn, who statistically had probably the best year of any Division III football student athlete this year, and potentially from past years as well. We had two cross-country All-Americans, one on the men's side with Nate Tassie from Roger Williams, one on the women's side with Rachel Brennan at Gordon. I'm going to guess they're not done with indoor and outdoor coming up.
Yep.
Just incredible student athletes, both academically and athletically, who are so dedicated to their craft and committed to their institutions and enhancing their program. So again, it's just so exciting to finally, you do a lot of work administratively at the conference level, and being able to get on site at championships and see those successes and those student athletes enjoying their time. Those are memories that you really are going to last a lifetime, quite honestly. So any small part that we can play in that and making that even better, just by an inch, is important to us as a conference, and is always exciting to see. But looking forward to winter championships. They're right around the corner, believe it or not. We've got about a month left in conference play in men's women's basketball, men's women's ice hockey. So a lot of games to play, but excited to see. We're having a lot of national success, specifically on the men's ice hockey side and the women's ice hockey side. Our men's and women's basketball, the parity on both sides is pretty significant, and it's going to be interesting. I wouldn't want to play anybody when it comes tournament time, which I think sets them up for success at the national level, quite honestly, because we play such a tough conference schedule. And kudos to some of the out of conference wins we had in basketball. Some of our coaches don't do themselves a service by playing some of these top 25 teams that they have played. And I think that's really going to prep them for success as they continue through this last month of the season. So I won't get ahead of myself for the spring, because we're trying to live in the now, as they say. But
That's right.
I'm really excited about getting back out there and seeing our student athletes in action here soon.
That's right. And so for those who don't know, Winter Championships coming up starting February 25th with our basketball first rounds. Hockey will start on February 26th, with Hoops Championship being on March 1st. Men's and women's ice hockey also coming the following weekend on Saturday, March 8th. But I completely agree with you. Fall championships were amazing. Great atmospheres all around. So kudos to all of our institutions. But great State of the Union. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate everything you have to give, and we'll hear from you again soon.
Thanks, Brett. Appreciate you having me, and look forward to the next one.
Once again, thank you so much to our Commissioner Patrick Colbert for his time. Really appreciate what he had to contribute. Also, thank you so much once again to Zoe Wexler, senior from Western New England, for her time giving the inaugural student-athlete interview. Hopefully one of you listening out there will be on our next episode coming up in March. So stay tuned for that. But good luck to everybody, at least winter sports coming down the wire in the regular season and postseason starting at the end of the month. And good luck to the start of the seasons for all of our spring sports. The lacrosses, baseball, softball, track and field, men's tennis. And so good luck to all those. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been our inaugural episode of Leading as One, the official podcast of the Conference of New England. I'm Brett Bosley. We'll see you next time.